You want to know what's actually insane? When someone acts like you're the villain for having feelings and wanting to maintain a connection with someone you genuinely cared about. I'm Chloe, I'm 22, and apparently I'm the bad guy in this whole mess because I didn't want to throw away 3 years of history over some hurt feelings. So here's what happened. Me and Landon had been together since we were basically kids. I was 19, he was 18 when we started dating, our senior year of high school. 3 whole years of my life with this guy. And yeah, things got complicated when we both started college, but that's normal, right? Like everyone goes through rough patches. But apparently Landon couldn't handle the reality that relationships take work and sometimes the butterflies fade and you have to actually put in effort instead of just coasting on whatever initial attraction brought you together. The thing is, I started noticing changes probably 6 months before I actually ended things. He used to be fun, like freshman year, he was always down to go out, hit parties, be spontaneous, but then he did this complete 180 and became Mr. Serious Boyfriend. Always wanting to study together, always asking what I was doing, where I was going, who I was with. It was suffocating, honestly. Like, I get that he was trying to be committed or whatever, but it felt like he was trying to prove something instead of just being natural about it. And don't even get me started on how clingy he got. Every text had to be answered immediately. Every plan had to include both of us. God forbid I wanted to have a girls' night or do something on my own. He'd get this look, like I was abandoning him or something. It's like he forgot we're supposed to be individuals too, not just half of some couple unit. I tried dropping hints that I needed more space, more excitement, more of that spark we used to have. I'd suggest we try new things, or maybe take a little break from being attached at the hip, but he'd just try harder. More flowers, more surprise visits, more of that intense staring thing he'd do when he thought I wasn't looking. It was honestly kind of desperate, and it turned me off even more. The worst part was how our friends started treating us like this perfect couple. Goals, this, and so cute that. Meanwhile, I'm feeling trapped and bored out of my mind, but I can't say anything, because then I look like the ungrateful girlfriend who doesn't appreciate a good guy. And yeah, he was good to me, I guess. But good and right for me are 2 different things. I started noticing other guys more. Not in a cheating way, I'm not that person, but just noticing. Like this guy in my psychology class who was funny and spontaneous and didn't analyze every single interaction we had. Or guys at parties who could just have fun without making everything about our relationship status. It made me realize what I was missing. But every time I tried to bring up how I was feeling, Landon would get this panicked look and start promising to change or asking what he could do better. He couldn't just hear that maybe we weren't working anymore. It always had to be fixable, like I was a problem to be solved instead of a person who might just want something different. So finally, after months of feeling like I was slowly suffocating, I did what I should have done earlier. I sat him down and told him the truth. That I loved him, but I wasn't in love with him anymore. That the spark was gone for me, and I didn't think it was coming back. That we'd grown into different people, and maybe that was okay. And you know what he said? Nothing. For like 5 whole minutes, he just sat there staring at me like I'd told him someone died. Then he asked if there was someone else, which honestly hurt because it showed how little he understood me. This wasn't about another guy. This was about me and what I needed. I tried to explain that we could still be friends. That just because the romantic part wasn't working didn't mean we had to lose each other completely. We had so much history, so many good memories, and he knew me better than almost anyone. I genuinely meant it when I said I wanted him in my life. But apparently that was asking too much. He said he needed space to process and couldn't just flip a switch and be my friend. Which I guess I understand in theory, but it felt like he was punishing me for being honest about my feelings. Like I was supposed to stay in a relationship that wasn't making me happy, just to spare his feelings. The whole thing was so frustrating because I was trying to handle it maturely. I could have just ghosted him or cheated or been cruel about it. Instead, I was honest and tried to preserve what was good between us, and somehow that made me the bad guy. I spent 3 years of my life with him. I'm not gonna pretend that meant nothing just because the romantic part didn't work out. But now everyone's acting like I'm some heartless monster who led him on and then destroyed him. When really, I'm the one who had the guts to admit when something wasn't working instead of just staying miserable to keep up appearances. I thought he'd appreciate my honesty eventually, but apparently he'd rather just cut me out completely than deal with complicated feelings like an adult. After the breakup, I genuinely thought Landon would come around once he had some time to process everything. I mean, we'd been best friends before we were anything else, right? You don't just throw that away because things didn't work out romantically. But apparently, he was determined to make this as difficult as possible. I gave him a week of space, which honestly felt like forever. Then I sent a simple text just checking in, seeing how he was doing. Nothing dramatic or relationship-y, just basic human decency. And he left me on read. For 3 days. Like, who does that to someone they supposedly cared about for 3 years? So I figured maybe texting wasn't the right approach. We used to study together at this coffee place near campus all the time, so I started going there during his usual study hours. Not to ambush him or anything, just to be available if he wanted to talk. The first time I saw him there, I waved, and he literally packed up his stuff and left. It was so dramatic and unnecessary. Between us, I was starting to get really hurt by how cold he was being. Like, I get that breakups are hard, but we were talking about friendship here. I wasn't asking him to date me again. I just wanted my friend back. Is that really so unreasonable? My roommate Kira kept telling me to give him more time, but honestly, how much time does someone need to accept reality? We broke up. We can still care about each other. Life goes on. It's not that complicated unless you make it complicated. So I started reaching out to our mutual friends to see how he was doing. Not in a stalker way, just normal, concerned friend behavior. But apparently even that was too much because P started getting weird with me about it. Like Jenna from our friend group actually told me I should let him heal in peace. Heal from what? We had an amicable breakup where I was nothing but honest and kind. The thing that really got to me was when I found out he'd been telling people he needed space from me. Not space in general, space from me specifically. Like I was some toxic person he needed to recover from, instead of someone who'd been nothing but good to him for 3 years. It was honestly insulting. I tried a different approach and started including him in group activities. Normal friend stuff, study groups, movie nights, casual hangouts, where it wouldn't be weird for both of us to be there. But he'd either not show up or leave early if I was there. It was like he was actively trying to avoid me, which was just hurtful and petty. The worst part was watching our friend group get all awkward about it. People started having separate hangouts or forgetting to invite one of us to things. It was like they thought we couldn't be in the same room together like mature adults. I kept trying to show everyone that I was fine, that this didn't have to be weird. But Landon was making everything dramatic by refusing to just be normal about it. I remember this one time I brought cookies to his dorm, the kind his mom used to make that he always said he missed. I thought it was a sweet gesture that showed I still cared about him as a person. But when I knocked, his roommate answered and said he wasn't there, even though I could literally see his backpack by the door. It was so obvious he was hiding from me like a child. That's when I realized he was probably telling people I was being too much, or whatever. Because suddenly everyone had opinions about how I should handle the situation. People who barely knew our relationship were telling me I needed to respect his boundaries and give him what he asked for. But nobody seemed to care about my feelings or my need to maintain important relationships in my life. I started feeling like I was being painted as this crazy ex-girlfriend, when really I was just trying to preserve a friendship with someone I genuinely cared about. The whole thing was so frustrating because I was being the mature one, trying to handle this like an adult, while he was throwing a 3-year friendship away because his feelings got hurt. And honestly, part of me was starting to think he was doing this on purpose. Like maybe he thought if he held our friendship hostage, I'd realize I made a mistake and want him back romantically. Which was manipulative if that's what he was doing. and also completely missed the point of why I ended things in the first place. The whole situation got even more ridiculous when Landon started acting like I was some kind of stalker for trying to maintain normal social connections. I mean, we go to the same college, we have the same friends, we're in some of the same classes. Did he expect me to just disappear into thin air? But apparently showing up to places where I knew he'd be was boundary crossing. According to who? We're both adults, we both have the right to exist in the same spaces. If he was uncomfortable, maybe he should examine why, instead of trying to make me feel guilty for living my life. The breaking point for me was when I heard through our friend group that he'd been complaining about me to basically anyone who would listen. Suddenly, everyone had something to say about my behavior, like they knew the full story. People who weren't even there for our relationship were acting like experts on what I should or shouldn't do. So I decided to try talking to his family. His mom and I had always gotten along great, and I thought maybe she could help him see reason. I sent her a message on Facebook, just explaining that I missed their family and hoped we could still have some kind of relationship, even though Landon and I weren't together anymore. Normal stuff that people do after amicable breakups. But apparently, that was crossing a line too. His sister actually called me and told me to stop contacting their family because it was making Landon uncomfortable. Like, excuse me? I spent 3 years being part of that family, going to their holiday dinners, building relationships with these people, and now I'm just supposed to pretend none of that mattered? It was becoming clear that Landon was turning everyone against me, making me out to be this desperate ex who couldn't take a hint. When really, I was just trying to salvage something good from a situation that didn't have to be all or nothing. I started noticing he'd leave group chats when I joined them. He'd make excuses not to come to parties if he knew I'd be there. He was literally restructuring his entire social life around avoiding me, which was not only dramatic, but also really unfair to our mutual friends who were caught in the middle. The thing that really drove me crazy was how everyone acted like his feelings were the only ones that mattered. What about my feelings? What about the fact that I was losing my best friend, and nobody seemed to care? I was grieving too, but apparently my grief didn't count, because I was the one who ended the romantic relationship. And then came the incident that really showed his true colors. I was having a panic attack outside the library, completely unrelated to him, just stress from school and everything else that was going on. He happened to walk by and saw me crying, and for a second, it was like the old Landon came back. He sat with me, made sure I was okay, even walked me back to my dorm. I thought maybe we'd finally turned a corner, that he realized we could care about each other without it being romantic. I was so hopeful that we could finally start being friends again. But the next day, he was back to ignoring me. Like that moment of human decency was just a blip, and now we were back to the cold shoulder treatment. It was honestly cruel to give me hope like that, and then snatch it away. That's when I realized he was playing games, probably trying to keep me on an emotional roller coaster because he was still hurt about the breakup, which was manipulative and honestly beneath the person I thought he was. I deserved better than these mind games, especially from someone who claimed to have loved me. I tried talking to him about it directly, caught him after class, and asked if we could please just have one honest conversation about where we stood. But he just said he'd been clear about needing space, and walked away. Like I was some stranger bothering him, instead of someone who'd been his partner and best friend for 3 years. That's when I knew I had to protect myself. If he wanted to throw away everything we'd built together over hurt feelings, that was his choice. But I wasn't going to keep chasing someone who was determined to make me feel like garbage for caring about him. Everything came to a head in the most embarrassing way possible. And honestly, I still can't believe Landon made such a scene over nothing. I was just trying to return his sweatshirt that I'd had for months. Being considerate and mature about loose ends. I knew he worked at the tutoring center, so I stopped by during what I thought was a quiet time. But apparently showing up at his job was some kind of major violation. The second he saw me, his whole attitude shifted. In front of his coworkers and students, he started raising his voice, telling me to stop showing up places and leave him alone. Like I was some crazed stalker instead of someone returning his property. I was so shocked I couldn't even respond properly. Here I was, trying to do the right thing, and he's treating me like I'm harassing him. In public, with witnesses. It was humiliating and completely uncalled for. All I wanted was to give him his stuff back, and maybe have a normal human conversation, but he turned it into this huge, dramatic scene. The worst part was how everyone was staring. These random students and his coworkers looking at me like I was some unhinged person who'd just been screaming at her ex-boyfriend. When really, he was the one who escalated everything by making a big deal out of nothing. I literally just walked in with a sweatshirt, and suddenly, I'm the villain? I tried to explain that I was just returning his things, but he cut me off and said something about harassment and how I needed to respect his boundaries. Harassment? For returning borrowed clothes? The whole thing was so blown out of proportion, it was ridiculous. Between us, I think he'd been waiting for an excuse to make me look crazy in front of other people. Like he wanted witnesses to see him standing up for himself so he could play the victim even more. Because there's no way a normal person reacts that strongly to someone returning their property. I left, obviously, because I'm not going to stand there and be humiliated. But I was shaking, I was so upset. Not because I still had feelings for him romantically, but because someone I'd cared about for 3 years had just treated me like garbage in front of strangers. It was cruel and unnecessary, and honestly showed me who he really was underneath all that nice guy facade. Within hours, I started getting texts from people who'd heard about what happened. Apparently, his version of events made it sound like I'd shown up screaming and demanding to get back together or something equally dramatic. Which was completely false. But of course everyone believed him because he was the heartbroken victim in this whole situation. I tried explaining to people what actually happened, but apparently I was making excuses and not taking responsibility. Taking responsibility for what? Returning someone's belongings? Trying to be mature about an awkward situation? I was the one trying to handle things like an adult while he was having public meltdowns. That's when I realized he'd been setting me up for this. Making me out to be the crazy ex so that when he finally snapped, everyone would be on his side. It was manipulative and honestly kind of sick that he'd planned it out like that just to make himself look better. My roommate Kira even started giving me grief about it, saying I should have known better than to go to his job. Known better than what? I was being considerate by returning his things instead of just keeping them or throwing them away. But apparently even basic courtesy was too much to ask for. The whole thing just confirmed what I'd been thinking, that Landon couldn't handle mature adult relationships. He wanted everything to be black and white. All or nothing, instead of acknowledging that people can care about each other in different ways. His inability to see nuance was probably part of why our romantic relationship didn't work in the first place. I decided right then that I was done trying to reason with someone who was determined to misunderstand me. If he wanted to burn bridges and turn people against me, that said way more about his character than mine. I'd tried to preserve our friendship. I'd tried to be mature about everything, and this was how he repaid me. Fine. His loss. After that humiliating scene at his job, I figured people would see how unreasonable Landon was being. Like, who reacts that strongly to someone returning their property? But apparently everyone thought I was the problem, which honestly says more about them than me. My roommate Kira completely blindsided me by taking his side. She actually sat me down for some kind of intervention, telling me my behavior had been concerning and that I needed to reflect on my actions. Reflect on what exactly? Trying to maintain a friendship with someone I cared about? The whole conversation was so condescending and unfair. But Kira wasn't the only one. Suddenly, everyone had opinions about what I should or shouldn't have done. People who barely knew our relationship were acting like experts, telling me I should have just left him alone from the beginning. Easy for them to say when they've never had to navigate losing their best friend over something as stupid as hurt feelings. The worst part was how they all acted like I was being obsessive or unable to let go, which was completely ridiculous, because this was never about getting him back romantically. I'd been perfectly clear about that from day one. I just didn't think we had to lose our entire friendship because the romantic part didn't work out. Then people started avoiding me. Not in an obvious way, but I noticed. Group chats getting quieter when I joined, people making excuses when I suggested hanging out, that awkward silence when I walked into a room. It was like they all had some secret meeting where they decided I was the villain in this whole situation. And you know what the really messed up part was? I started hearing through the grapevine that Landon was doing great. People would mention how happy he seemed, how he was really thriving now. Like my absence from his life was some kind of gift instead of a loss. Which honestly hurt more than I expected it to. Between us, I think people were just taking his side because they felt sorry for him. Poor little Landon got his heart broken by the mean girl who didn't want to be with him anymore. Never mind that I'd tried to handle everything as kindly as possible, or that I genuinely wanted to preserve our friendship. The narrative was already written, and I was the villain. I started noticing how differently people talked to me. Like they were walking on eggshells or waiting for me to do something crazy. It was so frustrating, because I'd never done anything actually wrong, but somehow I was being treated like I was unhinged. The breaking point came when I heard Landon had started casually seeing someone. Some girl from his engineering program who was apparently really sweet and good for him. Which, fine. Good for him, I guess. But the way people talked about it like she was upgrading his life or something was really insulting to our entire 3-year relationship. I tried to be mature about it, I really did. But seeing posts of them together, hearing people talk about how cute they were, it was hard not to feel like everyone was celebrating the fact that he'd moved on from me. Like our relationship had been some burden he was finally free from. And honestly, it started to really bother me how quickly everyone forgot that I had feelings too. Like I was supposed to just disappear quietly and let everyone move on without me. Well, sorry, but I existed in this friend group before Landon and I didn't see why I should have to lose all my social connections because he couldn't handle being around me. So I started speaking up more. When people would gush about his new relationship, I'd remind them that we'd had good times too. When they'd act like he was better off without me, I'd point out that I'd been nothing but supportive during our relationship. Just basic facts that apparently made people uncomfortable. But even that was too much, according to some people. Apparently I was supposed to just smile and nod while everyone acted like my 3-year relationship had been meaningless. Sorry, but I have self-respect, and I wasn't going to pretend our history didn't matter just to make other people comfortable. That's when I realized these people had never really been my friends anyway. Real friends would have understood both sides instead of just picking a team. Real friends would have cared about my feelings too, not just his. The whole situation really showed me who people actually were when things got complicated. Everything completely fell apart at what was supposed to be a normal house party. I wasn't even planning to go originally, but Kira convinced me it would be good to get out and show everyone I was doing fine. Which I was, by the way. I was doing perfectly fine and just wanted to have a normal social experience without everything being about Landon. But of course he was there. With her. And everyone was acting like they were the cutest thing ever, which was honestly nauseating to watch. Not because I wanted him back, but because it was so obvious everyone was overcompensating to show how much they approved of his upgrade. I tried to just enjoy myself and ignore the whole situation, but people kept making these pointed comments. Like when someone said, "It's so nice to see Landon happy again," right in front of me. Or when his new girlfriend got introduced around like she was meeting royalty. The whole thing was so transparently designed to make me feel like garbage. Between us, I'd had a few drinks by that point, and I was getting really tired of pretending everything was fine. So when I overheard them talking about some trip they were planning together, the same kind of trip he used to say we couldn't afford when we were together, I might have made a comment about how convenient that was. apparently that was starting drama, because suddenly everyone was staring at me like I'd committed some major social crime for making one observation about the irony of the situation. But when his new girlfriend made little passive-aggressive comments about moving forward and leaving the past behind, that was totally fine, apparently. The whole thing escalated when Landon came over and told me I was making people uncomfortable and needed to find somewhere else to be. At his friend's party that I'd been invited to. Like I was some party crasher instead of someone who'd been part of this group for years. And that's when I completely lost it. Because I was so tired of being painted as the villain for having normal human emotions. So tired of everyone acting like I was supposed to just disappear quietly while he got to keep all our mutual friends and start fresh like our relationship had never mattered. I told him exactly what I thought. About how he'd turned everyone against me. How he'd made me out to be some crazy ex when I'd only ever tried to be his friend. How it was convenient that he'd found someone new so quickly after claiming he needed space to heal. Just basic truths that apparently no one wanted to hear. But somehow, me telling the truth became this huge scene. People started recording, someone called me unhinged, and suddenly I was being asked to leave by people who'd known me for years, for defending myself against someone who'd been systematically destroying my reputation for months. The worst part was watching everyone's faces, like they were seeing some confirmation of what they'd already decided about me. Not the months of me trying to be reasonable, not all the times I'd been mature about an impossible situation, just this one moment where I finally stood up for myself. I left, obviously, because I wasn't going to stand there and be ganged up on by people who'd already made up their minds. But the damage was done. Within hours, that video was everywhere. People who hadn't even been there were sharing it and making comments about crazy ex behavior. And you know what the really messed up part is? I still don't think I did anything wrong. Was I supposed to just stand there and let him humiliate me in front of everyone? Was I supposed to smile and nod while people celebrated how much better his life was without me? I'm human. I have feelings, and sometimes those feelings are going to come out when people push you too far. But apparently having feelings makes you crazy when you're the ex-girlfriend. Landon gets to play victim and everyone rallies around him. But I defend myself once, and suddenly I'm the villain of the story. The whole thing just proved that this was never about my actual behavior. People had already decided I was the bad guy, and they were just waiting for evidence to confirm it.